something that could be sampled when he came across a pair of pants. They were labeled as the pants Arliss was wearing the night she was killed, but there was simply no way that could have been the case. They were far too big for her. It was then realized that the evidence had been mislabeled and the pants marked as belonging to Arliss were actually Bruce's. When the error was discovered, the actual pants Arliss was wearing that night were found and analyzed by DNA experts who found bodily fluid on them. And these results came back as a match for Steve. A clearer picture of what might have happened to Arliss then took shape from there. As investigators focused in on Steve, who was now in his 70s, they learned about a potential motive that could have led him to killing Arliss. When he started working for the Stanford Department of Public Safety in 1971, officers were allowed to carry guns, but then a new police chief came in the following year and shook things up. After taking a look at the department's officers and policies, he concluded that many of his personnel were not qualified to carry firearms. So to remedy this, he had an entire department reapply for their jobs, and in the end, about 3/4 of the officers were found to be deficient in proper firearms training, and Steve was among them. As a concession to these officers, the chief allowed them to remain on the force as unarmed security guards. Steve was apparently unreasonably bitter about this change, but despite it, he decided to continue doing the job. This decision, however, only allowed him to play out acts of revenge against the university. He stayed on the force until 1976, and during his tenure as an unarmed guard, he took to stealing from offices. He apparently took a walking cane that had been given to the university's founder, rare books, and a human skull, among other items. He even managed to steal a blank Stanford diploma, and one night went to the print shop and printed out a degree in his name. Eventually, police caught up with him, and he was arrested for receipt of stolen property. And when detectives spoke to him after his arrest, he said he was upset with the university for taking away his firearm and the police for treating him like a suspect in Arliss's murder. Detectives then took their time to button up their investigation, and by the midway point of 2018, the case was closing in around Steve. To that point, he had been living the life of a man who had gotten away with murder, but it was finally coming to an end. On June 28th at 9:04 a.m., sheriff's deputies arrived outside Steve's apartment to serve a search warrant. After knocking on the door, deputies made verbal contact with Steve, but when they entered his apartment, he was standing in his living room with a gun in his hands. Deputies immediately retreated and believed they were about to have a lengthy standoff with Steve, but that wasn't what happened. No sooner did deputies leave the apartment when they heard a single gunshot